While still in high school, I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered if I could make a painting of myself. I found that I could, even though it was a mirror image. What's more difficult is seeing oneself or others, because we all have a strong tendency to see what we want to see and what we expect to see. That's one of the great challenges of the professional portrait painter, those who do commissions and need to satisfy their clients. One of my first self-portraits was painted in 1953, when I was 22 years old and very interested and influenced by Italian Renaissance painters. The following self-portrait in the video reaches beyond that period for a more modern representation. I generally choose friends and acquaintances to serve as models. Many of my sitters are drawn from the University of Delaware faculty and staff. Since the sitter and I will be spending a good deal of time together, I choose to paint from life rather than photographs. I select people who I will enjoy getting to know, both visually and in other ways. I want to make a painting that will represent the sitter and my interpretation, my way of seeing them, and finding a way to create a living painting, not just a record of what I'm observing. I invite people to sit for me for a 2-hour session, ideally for several sessions. Over 50 years, I've created many self-portraits and paintings of others. There are 43 subjects in this video and more than 100 paintings, because I often do several versions of the same sitter. Some of my sitters really enjoy the experience of posing, and I invite them back for multiple sessions. This also provides me with the opportunity to experiment with different approaches and to extend my interpretations. The large number of paintings of my friend Jay Rosenthal in the early part of this video is a good example of this practice. He introduced me to the advantages of using a digital camera as a valuable aid in my painting process in general. I find that I'm drawn at sometimes to create a fairly descriptive image of my sitter. Perhaps I'm trying to please the person or trying to do what I think they might want or expect, although I find many of the sitters are open to my doing more interpretive experimental work. I'm very impressed by the portraits of other artists, Frans Hals and Rembrandt, each in their own distinctive way. Hals seems to have been able to find his way in the painting more directly. Rembrandt needed to build his image slowly. Anthony van Dyck technically seems somewhere in between. The American painter John Singer Sargent was a brilliant portrait painter, albeit not very penetrating, perhaps because he was often completing commissions. Cézanne, Van Gogh, Alice Neel, and Lucian Freud have been important models for my way of making a portrait, perhaps the most important. I've learned a great deal from each of these artists. For the most part, they were not completing commissions and so had a very different relationship with their subjects as I do. Most of the time my sitters enjoy the experience of having their portraits painted, though sitting fairly still for a 30-minute segment can be challenging. I've set up a mirror so that the sitter can see me painting during the process. We talk, which of course is very different from my usual isolated way of painting, based on my imagination, sketches, and memory as my company. I will take some photographs for detailed information when the sitter is not available, but I find that this can be counterproductive, because it is the live energy of the sitter that can provide a richer source of data and experience. Even the best photographs offer limited visual data. When the sitter comes to my studio, I ask them to choose how they will seat themselves. They've already made a conscious or unconscious choice of how they will present themselves by what garment they have chosen to wear. Some sitters are very self-conscious, as might be expected. The conversation generally serves to increase the comfort level for the sitter and myself, because I too have my inhibitions. I may start with doing small studies, sketches to loosen myself up and to get to know the forms, the shapes that are created both by the facial expression and the body shape and posture. After the quick sketch, I ask to change the pose in order to ultimately arrive at something that is comfortable for the sitter and that I think will serve the needs I have in making an interesting painting. Ideally, the pose will be characteristic of the person, the kind of way they would generally present themselves or assume a familiar position. When these initial goals have been met, I will decide if I will limit myself to the head or choose to include more of the total figure. Will it be a small painting, 14 by 11 inches, or 40 by 30 inches, or something in between? Then I start to block in the large forms, seeking to create the image that is starting to form on my canvas, based on what data I've already absorbed in my mind and my eyes. I work from the general to the particular. Rather than try to collect each detail, I aim for the totality, though seeking details is often a path that needs to be restrained. My goal in portrait painting is to portray the person, and at the same time make a painting that will serve as more than a visual report, the physical impression. As the years have passed, I've taken more liberties with my approach, both in my self-portraits and those of others. I want to make an interesting painting, and perhaps create a new visual experience, with the sitter serving as a starting point and the process of observing and painting and my imagination working together. I believe this kind of portrait painting will enjoy a longer and more meaningful life, reveal more than those portraits whose primary purpose is to function as a document. The human face, body posture, the total being is a rich source for communication and has been a compelling subject for artists throughout the world. Each artist has solved the issue of visual representation in their own distinctive way, so we are left with powerful images. We get to see ourselves in new ways, and the people in the painting speak to us beyond the limits of time. I don't seek commissions to do portraits, but I've enjoyed doing them throughout my career. The finished painting is always subject to the sitter's decision about accepting it. Please feel free to contact me at Norsky, Norsky, @udel.edu should you be interested. Thank you very much.